In August 1939, the Germans and Soviets, they signed the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, which was also known as the Nazi-Soviet Pact, in which the countries became allies in all but name. Communists around the world were astonished, and it led to much confusion. For years, the Nazis were seen as the greatest enemy, and now the Soviet Union signed a pact with Hitler. How did communists in Britain, France, and the US respond? Find out today. Good to have you back on the channel. If you're new, my name is Stefan. I'm a Dutch history teacher and I make videos about history for you. If you like that, please consider subscribing and don't forget to hit the notification bell. Let's start. I get a lot of people saying that Nazism and communism are one and the same. They point out that both ideologies have led to the deaths of millions, and that is true. There are similarities. Both National Socialism and communism are totalitarian ideologies. In Hitler's Germany and Stalin's Russia, political opponents were persecuted and many people disappeared into concentration camps. Important differences were extreme nationalism versus internationalism. The image of the enemy was mostly based on race by the Nazis and based on class by the communists. And more important, back in the 1930s, the Nazis despised the communists and vice versa. Yet Hitler and Stalin did sign a pact. Initially, Stalin wanted to form an alliance with Britain and France. Soviet Foreign Minister Vyacheslav Molotov tried to form an alliance with Britain and France against Germany, but these talks deadlocked. Neither side was willing to trust the other side, so the Soviets turned their eyes to Germany. Hitler had plans for a quick campaign to conquer Poland, but was not so sure if he could get away with it, meaning France and Great Britain not intervening. In July, political negotiations about the affairs of Eastern Europe started. Early August, Nazi Foreign Affairs Minister Joachim von Ribbentrop offered a settlement for the area from the Baltic to the Black Sea. The Soviets, they were interested. Many of these regions had previously belonged to the Tsarist Empire and were lost after the Russian Revolution and the subsequent Civil War. On August 23rd, German plane with von Ribbentrop landed in Moscow. Arriving at the Kremlin, von Ribbentrop was surprised he was greeted by Joseph Stalin himself. Negotiations followed. The part of the non-aggression was soon agreed upon. The secret protocol on how to divide Eastern Europe took a bit longer. For the exact details about this pact, click on the video I present at the end screen. On September 1st, 1939, Germany invaded Poland and the Soviets joined in a few weeks later. They carved up the Second Polish Republic. The general response to the pact was one of shock and awe. The sinister news broke upon the world like an explosion, according to Churchill. The Italian foreign minister Count Ciano wrote in his diary, "There is no doubt that the Germans have struck a master blow. The European situation is upset." The reason for the shock and surprise was that for the previous 6 months, Stalin had been negotiating an anti-Hitler alliance with the British and the French. These negotiations had begun after the German takeover of Czechoslovakia in March 1939, but Moscow eventually halted the negotiations. Beyond the issue of Soviet right of military passage across Romania and Poland, there was a deeper reason for Moscow's decision to halt the Triple Alliance negotiations. Stalin did not believe the British and French were serious about fighting Hitler. He feared, indeed, that they were maneuvering to get him to do their fighting for them. As Stalin later told Churchill, he had the impression that the talks were insincere and only for the purpose of intimidating Hitler, with whom the Western powers would later come to terms. How did the communists of other countries respond to the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact when it was signed? Within Nazi Germany, communists were suppressed, yet in other nations communist parties did exist. These parties were under influence of Moscow via the Comintern, the Communist International, led and patrolled by the Communist Party of the USSR. The communists of other nations were strongly against the Nazis, but then all of a sudden Moscow signed a pact with those Nazis. When the pact was signed, the Executive Committee of the Communist International, the ECCI, the governing authority of the Comintern, urged communist parties to continue even more energetically the struggle against the aggressors, especially German fascism. Also because the pact did not exclude a future agreement between Britain and France. It was just a non-aggression pact, so it seemed. The General Secretary of the Communist International was a Bulgarian communist, Georgy Dimitrov. He wasn't able to foresee the future consequences of the pact since he was in limited contact with Stalin. When World War II broke out, German fascism, as the communists called it, was seen as the main danger, and Poland was fighting for its independence. The interpretation was changed once it became clear the Red Army invaded Poland as well. Stalin observed, "Would it be bad if we spread the socialist system to new territories and populations as a result of the crushing of Poland?" The ECCI Secretariat issued the following to the communist parties that the communist parties, particularly in France, Britain, Belgium and the USA, which have taken up positions at variance with this standpoint, must immediately correct their political line. Soon the term fascist to describe Germany disappeared from Comintern publications. The communists have always avoided the term National Socialist, by the way, because of the word socialism that bore too much resemblance to their own ideology. Now, to what extent Nazism was a form of socialism is a whole theoretical debate I myself am not gonna get into right now. The cynical nature of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, and particularly the Comintern's characterization of the war as imperialist and unjust on both sides, raised tentative yet nagging uncertainties in the heads of loyal communists. The most audacious even began to question the Soviets' commitment to proletarian internationalism. In some parties, bitter internal dissensions were the result, the tense dispute in the British Party being a prime example. The British Communist Party, the CPGB, was deeply shaken and surprised by the Nazi-Soviet pact, but approved it as a smart diplomatic move by the Soviet government. They continue their policy of resist fascism, whether it comes from abroad or at home. They were against the Chamberlain government, but did see the war against Nazi Germany as a just cause. A fight on two fronts, they called it. Interesting enough, its leader, Harry Pollitt, suppressed a Soviet press telegram in which responsibility for the war was laid at the hands of two imperialist groups of power, meaning Britain and France. With the return of Dave Springhall, the CPGB representative in Moscow, two opposing camps emerged within the British Communist Party, those who resisted Moscow's line and those who were in favor of it. Basically, pro-war and anti-war when it came down to war with Germany. During the Central Committee on the 2nd and 3rd of October, a heated debate took place. Rajani Palme-Dutt had Stalin and Dimitrov behind him and managed to win over most of the representatives in which the Comintern line of anti-war was to be followed. Many British communists, still haunted by the memories of World War I, were relieved with the outcome. Pollitt was effectively replaced as General Secretary by Dutt. In France, the situation was more intense. Until the pact was signed, the French Communist Party, the PCF, had fiercely opposed Hitler and was strongly anti-fascist. When the pact was signed, the line suddenly changed. The party justified the treaty as necessary means of protecting the Soviet Union from imperialist war. This caused great internal tensions, and the French government, which by now was at war with Germany, banned the PCF in September 1939 because it was seen as a pro-German organization. But also many French communists left the party because of the Moscow line, as the Central Committee called for peace, declaring that the war was no longer anti-fascist. The small Communist Party of Belgium initially claimed if Hitler attacks Belgium, the communists will stand in the front ranks defending its independence and the freedom of its populace, arms in hand. The Communist Party of the Netherlands, the CPN, was in a similar situation as in France. Until the pact, the CPN campaigned fiercely against Hitler and National Socialism. But after August 1939, the party turned abruptly and defended the pact as a tactical move by Stalin. This led to incomprehension and disgust among many members and sympathizers. As in France, Dutch authorities suddenly saw the CPN as suspect, and after the German invasion in May 1940, the party was banned and the organization went underground. In February 1941, the Dutch communists initiated the February strike against the German anti-Jewish policies in occupied Netherlands. Spanish communists, deeply antagonistic towards the democratic powers, found it easier to adapt to the consequences of the Nazi-Soviet pact than their British and French comrades. And it is understandable that the pact led to great confusion among communists as Nazi aggression was cynically misrepresented, as Molotov stated late October 1939 regarding the concept of an ideological war and the nefarious role of the Anglo-French imperialism, arguing that in Britain as in France, the partisans of war have declared an ideological war against Germany. No war of this kind would be justifiable today for any reason. Hitlerite ideology, like any other, can be accepted or rejected. This is a matter of personal political ideas. But anyone can see that an ideology cannot be destroyed by force. It is therefore not only senseless, but downright criminal to portray this war as a struggle to destroy Hitlerism under the false banner of a battle for democracy. Well, that has aged badly. When in April 1941 Yugoslavia and Greece were defeated by Germany, Stalin agreed that the struggle of the Yugoslavs and Greeks against Nazi aggression was justified. Yugoslav Communist Party, the KPJ, under Tito had already ignored some of the directives of the Comintern. It was after World War II that a split occurred between Tito's Yugoslavia and the USSR. The Communist Party of the United States of America, the CPUSA, under Earl Browder, was left in much confusion when the news of the Hitler-Stalin Pact reached them. As in Britain, two contrasting views emerged. One saw the outbreak of World War II as imperialist because of the Western powers that refused to ally with the USSR. Others welcomed a major war against Germany while denouncing Britain and France as insufficiently anti-fascist. Browder embraced the latter but strove for balance publicly. On September 11th, he held a speech in which he claimed that Hitler's followers were the war's instigators. Yet 18 hours later, the CPUSA received a directive from Moscow denouncing the Polish government and calling the war an imperialist conflict. Browder then came with a new statement. The struggle was not being waged to eradicate fascism. Instead, it resembled World War I, offering common folk only death and destruction, further misery and burdens. The party criticized British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain and French leader Edouard Daladier and advocated for US isolationism with slogans as "the Yanks are not coming" and "hands off," that claimed that Roosevelt was the head of a war party of the American bourgeoisie. When the USSR later annexed eastern Poland, laid claims on the Baltic nations and invaded Finland, the CPUSA considered Soviet security sufficient justification, supported the actions. When Hitler broke the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact and invaded the USSR, the line obviously changed. From now on, the war against fascism was on the forefront. Communists were to give their unstinting support to the Allied governments in their anti-fascist efforts. Here you see a British communist poster that urged for a second front in Europe. A front that eventually came to be with the Allied landings on Normandy in 1944. But the lines between the communists and the bourgeoisie governments of the Western Allies can be called an uneasy one, which eventually culminated into the Cold War. Now, if you want to learn more about the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, you can click right here. I want to thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you later.